Drew, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad uh, you took time out of your busy schedule to talk to me about something I think a lot of families are trying to do is plan their finances holistically. And this idea of financial independence, it's a buzzword, but like, how does that work for real families in the real world? So thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I enjoy talking to you about these things.
Yeah, and I know when I get a little report from Google, see what people are interested when they're finding my site and searching for the site. One of the top things is people, especially couples and families, how are you going to plan for retirement? And very specifically, it's this one question that keeps popping up like, how much do we need to actually retire? Whether it's early or it's a traditional retirement, that nest egg number seems to be something that people are striving for. I'm sure, with the wealth management team, that's a question they get a lot too, right?
Oh, for sure, definitely. And it's honestly
Mhm.
not an easy answer to
Yeah.
give. It takes a little bit of understanding the family and kind of what they want out of their retirement and what resources they have. Um, and it also comes down to, what are they willing to do now
Hmm.
to prepare for their retirement? So we come up honestly with a different number for every person that comes in. But we could talk about maybe some guidelines if you would like that.
I would love that because, of course, this is not going to be tailored financial advice. This is really just getting that conversation started. And I know a lot of couples in the day and age, we live with apps, online calculators. We want an answer fast. Actually, just the other day, my husband wasn't feeling well, and we went to WebMD and we're like, symptoms, trying to find a quick answer to what's going on. And I feel like sometimes that's the approach with finances. Can we get a ballpark number? And I've seen online calculators give different numbers depending on if they're saying it's a traditional retirement versus financial independence or an early retirement. And I've seen one where they base it on your income, like you have to have a certain amount of your income stashed away. And then in the financial independence space, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but a lot of them kind of follow this
Mhm.
4%. 4% rule where they take their annual spending and then they multiply it by 25 to kind of, get an idea of how much they need to sock away. I wanted to
Right.
ask you, like, you mentioned it's more complicated than that, just like plugging in a couple of numbers. So, what are some things families should consider when trying to figure out what's their number?
Right. So I think what a lot of those simplified
Mhm.
calculations can miss are really important factors like inflation and
Mhm.
taxes, and also a person's risk tolerance. So
Mhm.
if somebody is not willing to invest their money, but rather just save it in a savings account and be happy with the 2% interest rate, those calculations are not going to work for them.
Yeah.
Those calculations are based on typically like a 7% rate of return on your investment. So I think that a lot of times that's the problem with those calculations is
Mhm.
that they don't take into consideration what people are willing to do in terms of investing their money, also the kinds of investments or the kinds of accounts they're using. So
Mhm.
if you're putting all your money into a 401k plan, every dollar that comes out of that is going to be taxed.
Mhm.
Um, so you have to factor that in too, and that's not
Mhm.
really calculated in that 25 times expenses and then a 4% distribution rate. They don't use inflation or taxes in that calculation.
Gotcha. I think that's really important because, on the user end, those calculators are pretty slick, very easy to spit out a number, but there's assumptions that are made. So that's
Yeah.
great that you brought that out. And I know like a lot of people kind of just use it as a general, like this is what we shoot for as we get closer, then we definitely want to plan out more. But I wanted to talk to you about the idea I think that applies to many families, whether they're retiring early or not, is saving a significant amount of money towards retirement or investing towards retirement. And, I've seen those profiles and they make good headlines. They retire in 10 years, a couple, or even
Hmm.
faster, and they travel the world. But a lot of times when you dig into that, they're making really good income, six-figure incomes
Right.
between the two of them. So I kind of want to break it down into two things. The first one is for those families that are making a more typical income. I believe it was around the median was around 60,000 a year, maybe 80,000, depending on what area you're in. What would you say, just starting off, to kind of shoot for a savings rate?
Good question. And
Yeah.
once again, it's personalized,
Hmm.
right? So, and certainly the earlier you start, the smaller the percentage is.
Yeah.
Every 5 years or so that you delay saving for your retirement, that percentage goes up significantly.
Mm.
So I did a few calculations just to get ready for this
I know you. Yes.
podcast. I did. And it was pretty remarkable.
Hmm.
So just for someone who's at like 25,
Hmm.
they needed to be saving, let's say, 15% of their income in
Hmm.
order to replace their income in retirement. If
Hmm.
you waited till 40, you were having to save between 35 and
Oh,
40%
wow.
of your income. And
Hmm.
that's assuming retirement at age 65.
Hmm.
So, that time that you have to save money and the time that you have in the market. I used a
Hmm.
7% rate of return.
Yeah.
So the time that you have the money invested is really working in your favor. So the earlier you start, I mean, everyone's heard that the
Yeah.
earlier the better that you start saving. But to give someone a number that they
Hmm.
should be saving is hard to do,
Hmm.
depending on their age, how much they've saved. Like, for example, the 40-year-old that I used, I assumed
Yeah.
that they had saved nothing to that
Yeah.
point. But most 40-year-olds have a little bit stashed away, I would hope by now. Um, so I think it's
Hmm.
important really if you're going to use an online
Hmm.
calculator, to personalize it and to use a calculator. And there are lots of them out there that are decent,
Yeah.
but they have to take into consideration things like your age, how much
Hmm.
you've saved, are you counting on Social Security or not?
Hmm.
I can tell you if you don't count on Social Security,
Hmm.
you'll have to probably, for most cases, double your savings rate.
Mm.
So we do
Okay.
we do planning for people who say, I don't want to count on Social Security,
Okay.
and we run the plan for them, and they realize that it's virtually impossible to have a successful retirement without Social Security unless you're literally saving 50% of your income. And some people
Hmm.
can do that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to do that because they're still trying to live their lives and enjoy
Hmm.
themselves and raise children and save for other goals like college and buying a house and things like that. So they quickly realize that we need to have Social Security in order to be
Yeah.
successful, right? But also, you need to take
Mhm.
into consideration taxes and inflation, which I think a lot of people forget. But a good online calculator should have those variables in there for you to work with.
Yeah, definitely. But you do bring up a couple good points, and I think this is the focus in our community is you're trying to find that balance. You want to be financially responsible, save up, prepare for the future. But at the same time, we have many families, young kids, they want to enjoy this special time. So they want to make choices that are sustainable. And so, of course, if you're going to be saving for retirement, if you're going to be investing, the money has to come from somewhere. So I wanted to talk to you, if your experience talking, working as part of the wealth management team, what are some,
Mhm.
maybe I call them low hanging fruits or expenses in a family's budget that maybe they should look at to redirect or reallocate towards maybe future goals?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
So the reality is that
Mhm.
60% of most middle income families goes to three things: housing, cars, and food.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you've already bought your house, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do there unless you really do think you want to go through the process of selling and downsizing and
Mhm.
taking a smaller mortgage and a lower commitment there. The other is automobiles,
Mhm.
and choosing to have a more reasonably priced automobile or buying used, which is really, if you talk to any
Mhm.
financial expert, they would tell you never to buy a brand new vehicle. You should always buy one that's a couple years old.
Mhm.
Um, so then, that's hard to do too. If you've already bought that big SUV brand new, um, it's probably not a good idea to sell that, because you're going to take a big loss on it, and you may not even get as much as you have on the loan to cover it. So the third item is food, and
Mhm.
honestly, most people can save a lot of money on eating out. That's
Hmm.
probably one of the biggest expenses that people have that is completely controllable.
Hmm.
Um, and one of those is lunch. If you are work at a workplace and you are literally eating out for lunch every day, that can really take a toll on someone's budget. And then the third, the one that people
Hmm.
always like to beat up on, of course, is the $5 coffee at Starbucks, or wherever you get your coffee from. I don't want to beat up
Yeah.
Starbucks 'cause,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where you get your latte; it's always $5. But or your frappuccino, whatever your
Hmm.
taste is. But so minimizing those costs and economizing around your food consumption can really help a lot in terms of helping people, find money to save.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it does also boil down to that theme, like your priorities, what's important to you, why. And yeah, if those $5 lattes are like such a joy that, you don't have to
Hmm.
eat out because like in the morning, that's your treat for the day, maybe you might be able to write that off. But if you're doing that every day and you're not really getting the benefit out of it and it's keeping you
Right.
away from those bigger goals, then it's something to, talk about together and see if maybe you can challenge yourself for a week or two and maybe make it at home and get a French press or something if you really want it fancy.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I don't want to be
yeah,
a total buzzkill. People
no.
should do what
Mhm.
they enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Like I play soccer
Mhm.
and I will always spend the money it cost me to
Mhm.
buy my cleats, to pay my league fees. You're never
Yeah.
going to tell me to take that out of my budget. So if coffee is that important to you, then you got to find something else. Maybe it's
Yeah.
your Netflix subscription or, the gym membership or whatever. But, find the things that are less important to you and focus on getting those out of your budget and really do the things that really bring value to your life.
I love that, Drew, and if I took away something from this conversation, it is that personal finance, as cliche as it sounds, is really personal. The online calculators can be handy, to kind of get you something to shoot for. But if you really want something tailored, you have to focus on your family's particular needs and goals. So, guys, if you're listening right now and you want to have a plan that's made for you and your family, please check out Coastal. Go to bankbetter.org. Drew is part of Coastal's wealth management team. They're dedicated. I've talked with a lot of them. All of them are not just financially savvy, but real people that are interested in not just having you have a perfect budget, but a budget for real life, a budget where you're enjoying life and still hitting your goals. So thank you, Drew,
Right.
for coming back on. I always enjoyed our conversations. Thank you.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.